Welcome back to Total Freedom Radio for our Ancient Paganism class, Part 6, Ancient Paganism 8 Post-Flood Pagan Holy Days. Welcome to the show that is all about raising the bar of knowledge, healing hurting people, and spiritual warfare. I'm Rena Lynn, and I love to teach the Word of God. Let's get right on into it. We have been talking about the pre-flood world and the pre-flood paganism, where they were worshiping the fallen angels and then went into ancestor worship. I didn't get my slides back far enough. There we go. All right, let's do a quick recap of the pre-flood paganism, see what it included, because after the flood, paganism included all of these elements plus added some to it. So the first thing was they all had a unique individual god or idol in every home. Now, this was something that was to worship their ancestor because number two, they believed that they were all evolving into a god or goddess after they died, and those who had gone on ahead of them were closer to that. And so if they could contact them, they could shorten their own journey. They believed that the original creator God had ceased to exist. Remember Lucifer's lie, the doctrine of emanations, where the original God dissipated as he created everything and put himself into that creation. Now he is dispersed throughout creation and no longer exists in his original form. Now that is not the biblical idea of God. But it is the idea of all paganistic gods. Okay, salvation was not needed. Why would you need a God to save you if you're actually created from the essence of God? That's the thought. Number 5 was they had an observation of the sun and moon for omens. Number 6, they had an astrology that focused on the sun, moon, and zodiac, and their astrology was without horoscopes. Now we'll talk later on about more reasoning into this, but the basic premise of it is their ancestors and the fallen ones had given them certain days of the year that they could contact them and have their petitions heard. So it was very important to them to know when those days were. They didn't have calendars like we have today and a reminder on our phone. They had to do it another way. The Bible tells us that this was invented by demons. They had a ritual use of blood. It wasn't always sacrifice where someone died. Sometimes it was just blood, but it always included blood. They believed in evolution and reincarnation, and we talked about you cannot separate the two, and I'll break that down a little bit more later. All of these will be broken down again and again and again until there's a thorough understanding, and you see how it's in our lives today, our everyday lives, in the logos of companies, and sometimes in our churches. They believed in evolution that did not have karma, so there was no de-evolving. When they were born, lived their life, died, born again, lived another life, and died, each time it took them closer to becoming a god or goddess. The de-evolution began later. They believed in ghosts, demons, and nature spirits, and they had and practiced homosexual marriage. All right, let's talk about the 4 holidays. That's what it began with, or it went into 8. According to chapter 6 of the book of Jubilees, Noah decreed that 4 holidays would be commemorated. These commemorated the new moons of the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th months. These were given, called the turn of the seasons. Unlike the Noahide laws, which were given to God to us through Noah, these were an invention of Noah himself, and therefore we need not observe them. On the new moon of the first month, the new moon of the fourth month, the new moon of the seventh month, and the new moon of the 10th month are the days of remembrance and the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself as feast for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new day of the first month he was bidden to make for himself an ark, and on that day the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the 7th month, all the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account, he ordained them for himself as feast for memorial forever, and thus are they ordained. We find this in Jubilees 6:23 through 28. Now, notice Jubilees has the events of the 4th and 10th months correct, but the event of the 7th month is incorrect according to the Bible. The command to build the ark was probably in the seventh month, not the first, because we learn from the Talmud that the new moon of the first month, Tishrei, is the anniversary of creation and also when Noah was born. I believe it is more likely that the events were assigned to those dates by Noah's children rather than by Noah himself. Now, this commemoration will be twisted later into ancestor worship, so we'll look at that. Jubilees also states that Noah commanded his children to observe the anniversary of the flood. This occurred on the seventh day of the second month, or 2 days after the lunar reckoning of the autumn equinox. Paganism calls this Samhain. Today, we know it by the name Halloween. Now, if you're watching this on a visual, you can see the chart that I'm fixing to read, and if you're on the radio, we'll just try to follow along. All right, we'll talk about the first 4 holidays. They were celebrated on the new moon when it was dark. The first month was in the autumn, and it commemorated the creation of Noah. It commemorated creation and Noah's birthday. The fourth month was in the winter, and the abysses were closed. The seventh month was in the spring, and this commemorated the command to build the ark. And the 10th month was in the summer, and this commemorated when the tops of the mountains were seen. Now, they added one to that, the full moon, which was on the second month. It was the season of autumn, and they commemorated Noah's flood. Now, whether or not this legend is entirely true, it's obvious that early peoples had to commemorate the change of the seasons in order to keep crops planted at the right times and to be able to hunt animals for food without completely destroying their food supply. There are exactly 13 weeks for each of the 4 seasons and in a 52-week year. In time, the mid-season festivals were added, creating 8 holy days per year. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that these 13 weeks is part of that superstition about the number 13, but there's a whole lot more to it as well. As paganism developed, these events and the history about the evilness of pre flood mankind and Noah's flood would be twisted by Satan. Now, imagine that. A lunar calendar month always starts on a new moon. And again, this is the dark of the moon. Festivals usually fall on the 15th, which is the full moon of the month. As we go from the lunar calendar used by most of the ancient world, like the Jews, the Babylons, the Canaanites, and most pagan groups still today, to a solar calendar used by the ancient Romans and most of the world today, including America and Europe, these dates will vary slightly depending on the group or religion using them. Now, here's another chart, and this is a comparison between the ancient lunar calendar and the American calendar. So we'll start with the lunar calendar, we'll talk about the time of the year, and then we'll say the date on the solar calendar, for those of you that can't see the chart. The new moon of the first month is autumn equinox, and that's September 21st. The full moon of the second month is mid-autumn, and that's October 31st. The new moon of the fourth month, the winter solstice, December 21st. The full moon of the fifth month, midwinter, February 2nd. The new moon of the seventh month, spring equinox, March 21st. The full moon of the eighth month, midsummer, May 1st. The new moon of the 10th month, the summer solstice, June 21st. And the full moon of the 11th month, midsummer, July 31st. These were the dates they could contact their ancestors and where they had their pagan holidays. Now, those of you that can see again, look at this quartered circle. Anytime you see this symbol, I want you to begin to associate it with these things. Now, do people use this innocently? I'm sure they do. But this is always a symbol in the old times for these 4 initial holidays: the winter solstice, the spring equinox, the summer solstice, and the autumn equinox. This was the 4 quarters of the year. Now, it was at the season change. The autumn equinox was September 21st, and they celebrated Mabon. The winter solstice was December 21st. They celebrated Yule or Saturnalia during our Christmas time. The spring equinox is March 21st, and I'm not sure I can say this word correctly, but it looks like Ostern. Summer solstice, June 21st. They celebrated Litha, called it that. All right, the mid-season ones. We add 4 mid-seasonal holidays to the above 4 holidays that began the seasons, and we have a total of 8 holy days. Now, notice our quartered circle has 8 parts. So when you see this, I've heard it called the wagon wheel, I've heard it called the medicine wheel, I've heard it called lots of different things. But again, begin to associate this with these pagan holidays. The mid-autumn was October 31st. We call that Halloween. They call it Samhain. The midwinter is February 2nd, Groundhog Day, Candlemas, Imbolc, and Bridget. Do you ever wonder why they make such a big deal on the news and different things about Groundhog Day? It's one of these eight pagan holy days. Midsummer is May 1st. We have May Day, Beltane, Walpurgis Night. Midsummer, July 31st, this Lunasa and Lammas. And again, all of these things that I'm bringing in, it's just the initial training, and we'll break each one down, what it is, what they did, all kinds of stuff. We're not sure about the set times of the pre-flood pagan system since they may not have had seasons like we do today. But with Nimrod's revival of the system, these 8 days will be the basis for all pagan holidays. We can see that the 4 main pagan holidays were practiced by Sodom. Homosexuality and extreme paganism is what caused God to obliterate the city. Now, we all know about the homosexuality connected with Sodom, but has anyone ever taught you that the holiday of Halloween was also in that? Probably not. In those days, all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah and of the whole 5 cities were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. And they had in their land very extensive valleys, about half a day's walk, and in it were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times in the year. Pay attention to that, and with their wives and children and all belonging to them, and they rejoiced with timbrels and dances, etc. That's Jasher 18:11 through 13, and I'll add a little bit more to that in a few minutes that'll make your eyebrows raise. Now, in the Old Testament, a lot of times when it says high places, this is what they're talking about. Both the ancient rabbis and church fathers taught that Egypt was the first to bring back the magic system of the pre-flood world. This started to spread into various countries through the sons of Ham, according to the Jewish history book of Jubilees. This occurred after Canaan started settling the coast of Canaan and Israel, and I'll teach you a little background about that in a minute. And Canaan grew, and his father taught him writing, and he went to seek for himself a place where he might seize for himself a city. And he found a writing which former generations had carved on the rock, and he read what was thereon, and he transcribed it by owing to it. For it contained the teaching of the watchers, in accordance with which they used to observe the omens of the sun and the moon and the stars in all the signs of heaven. And he wrote it down and said nothing regarding it, for he was afraid to speak to Noah about it, lest he should be angry with him on account of it. That's Jubilees 8, 1 through 5. Now, look at some of these kingdom principles. He didn't build a city. He didn't go to better anybody. He went to take what somebody else had built. He went to seize for himself a city. And it kind of, in this passage, it kind of shows that he just bebopping around and he found this out by accident. But that's not exactly so. So let me give you just a little bit of background on that. Now, remember in one of the first teaching, we talked about the first, I think it was the first 10 that were the kings of the world and what their names meant. Okay, in the days of Enos, the people began to apostatize by making idols of their ancestors. Then Canaan realized that what was going on in his days, and it led to revival. Now, that's a different Canaan from the one here. This is probably a family name that was carried on. So Adam turned over the government to Canaan. Then, like all revivals, it gradually dissipated. And the false religion came back and it got worse and worse. In the days of Jared, the fallen angels came down on Mount Hermon and mixed the genetics, and now we have Genesis 6. So now it's even worse, right? In the days of Enoch, he led a much better revival that exceeded even Canaan's. So now Canaan turned the government over to Enoch until he was raptured, and then it was given to Methuselah. And again, the revival fizzled out. So now we have a pattern. We've had numerous revivals in our own time, but none have really lasted. People always seem to be pulled back to the worship of the fallen ones. In the last 500 years of each age, major prophecies are fulfilled. The flood wiped everything out. In the year 2000, Abraham would have been 52 years old, and before he was 75 and went down to settle in Canaan, there was a skirmish between some of the sons of Ham and some of the sons of Japheth. Shem ruled the Middle East and stayed out of it. Nimrod rose up during this time and went to do battle with his brother. He came with 500 men. Now, we're talking in a time when there wasn't that many people back on the earth yet. It was only 300 years after the flood. So, with 500 determined men, they managed to conquer the populated world. This came from 8 people to what they were now. He reestablished the false religion of ancestor worship with Nephilim theology or history that included astrology and all the things that we've been looking at. He had a kind of a false prophet, and he himself was kind of an antichrist figure. It was complete tyranny where they took over the world. And if you want to know more about this, read Jasher, Josephus, and some of the church fathers, and you'll find it all there. This different Canaan that we're talking about now, another grandson of Ham, settled into Sidon. He didn't settle, he went there and seized for himself a city. Then he settled. It's what we call Lebanon. He quietly took over, and Mount Hermon was straight east of there. Remember, that's the headquarters of the fallen angels from Genesis 6 when they came down and married the women. He looked around for written records about the worship of them and found them. I noticed he went out and looked. He was looking for this. He had to have known about it. It described how to make Nephilim and sounds much like modern gene splicing, although we didn't think that was known to them then. If the fallen ones were behind it, they would have probably known, presumably. One of the Dead Sea Scrolls, called the Book of the Giants, deals with this. It doesn't give enough information to actually do it now, but the concept is there. And the process that's described in that book sounds much like modern gene splicing. So now we have post flood giants and several clans. Canaan and Nimrod joined together and they form an empire. Nimrod was 40 when he came up with the 500 men and was a total madman tyrant. He'd go into a city state, he'd kidnap the king's sons and daughters. And remember, everybody was independent then, so all they had was themselves. They had these walled cities, and if somebody who was stronger than you fell. But he'd let the king know that as long as he did what Nimrod wanted him to do or told him to do, his children would be fed, housed, and basically be okay. But he said, if you don't do exactly what I tell you to do, or if I just get mad at you for any reason, I won't kill your kids. I'm going to torture them. And then he'd send them a list of the awful things that he'd do to his kids and ask, now, are we on the same page? Well, you know what the only answer to that was, right? Unless you could find a way to get your kids back. And no one could stand up to him in that day. So he's doing this, conquering the world, while Canaan is using science to recreate the giants. So it gets out of hand. And a prophecy that Nimrod would die by the hand of son of Abraham is given, and it would destroy his empire. But we'll get to that later. Just wanted to give you a little background into this slide that we're looking at right now. All right. The ancient church fathers wrote that Ham was the first post-flood magician. He must have received those pre flood practices and handed him down to his sons. The quote above makes it seem like finding and translating the pagan relics was the basic cause of the revival of the old religion. So Lucifer's lie was once again the caused them to doubt Noah's history, even though he was an eyewitness of the destructions. Now, you know that he told his children, his grandchildren, his great grandchildren, the 8 that were on that ark, they'd seen it. You know that they raised their family, teaching them about the wickedness before the flood, how terrible it was, what happened to humanity, what it was like being on the boat, watching all the rest of the world basically drown, and warning them against this. And yet, they picked it back up. Watch what you allow to read and what you watch on TV because it influences you and your children in ways that you don't always realize. I want you to think about the word television as hell-a-vision. Anything that we're continually putting in our mind is going to change our thoughts. Ham's son Mizraim founded Egypt. The Bible records show the Egyptian magicians withstood Moses, so even 792 years after the flood, the old system was still going strong. And we'll see what the Egyptian magicians do when we study Balaam later. Ham's son Canaan traveled up the coast to Shem's territory and founded the Canaanites. The ancient rabbis give us detailed information about how the Canaanite sorcerers practiced their religion. The Persians and the Persians were descendants of Elam, the son of Shem, and the Persian Magi inherited their magic system from the time that Nimrod ruled over them. Now, again, Nimrod was the grandson of Ham. Nimrod invaded Iraq and he founded the first Babylonian Empire. So, see how this is going through these nations that we're still dealing with through the centuries? Because they went back to worship of the old ones. In the city of Zor was founded by Bela. Bela was an Assyrian who left Assyria and came to Canaan, which is in the territory Noah gave to Shem, his forefather. And he founded his home there because he had every right to settle there, being a descendant of Shem. Bela left his homeland because of Nimrod's evil government. The city of Sodom and Gomorrah were founded by Canaanites, and in time they too adopted paganism to such an extreme measure that God destroyed them with fire. This is why Lot went to Zor, and the city of Zor was spared. It was actually founded by a righteous man. Now let's stop right here for a minute and let me recognize my sponsors, please. .com to the affiliates page, and please click
Sorry about
in
that. I
from
didn't have it
there,
restarted
and
from
it'll take
last
you.
time.
Folks, you want to help Total Freedom Radio stay on the air? Please help support our sponsors. We have Simply Clean Foods. Primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. As a community-focused company, they strive to help our veterans through food donations and provide food to victims of natural disasters. They're dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Their stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMO policy in testing for heavy metals make them unique in the storable foods market. They say just because our food is freeze dried doesn't make it just for emergencies. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away food that you don't use. Just take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Go to renalyn.com to the affiliates page and please click in from there, and it'll take you straight to my page, and it'll kick back just a little bit to us to help us with our cost. Thank you so much for supporting our sponsors. If you love healthy food and supplements, find the USDA organic green and white emblem on my website. This is my affiliate link, and it'll take you straight to the Brighteon.com store. This is the Health Ranger store, and all of his products are tested, and it's where I get items for myself. You can also find a link on my videos if you go there to watch them. Thanks for supporting my sponsors. All right, let's go on. In order to understand the outbreak of ancient paganism, we need to look at the religious magic systems of Egypt, Babylon, Canaan, and Sodom and understand these all came through the sons of Ham. We'll look first at Nimrod's religion and the practices of ancient Sodom. And here is a artist rendition of Nimrod and his greatness at that time and all the pagan religions that came in under him. Here's some pictures of the Dead Sea, where it is said that under the Sea of Salt, the ruins of Sodom lie. We know what pre-flood paganism, the free, pl- the pre-flood pagan system consisted of from the chapter on pre-flood history. So let's look and see what Nimrod added to those first 13 elements. He added the idea that the 12 signs of the zodiac were gods in their own right. So he did not just worship his ancestors, but the natural spirits or the nature spirits that developed through the Middle Ages. We'll see how this concept of nature spirits develops later. And Abraham asked his father, saying, Father, tell me, where is God who created heaven and earth and all the sons of men upon the earth, and who created thee and me? And Terah answered his son Abram and said, Behold, those who created us are all with us in the house. And Abraham said to his father, My Lord, show them to me, I pray thee. And Terah brought Abram into the chamber of the inner court, and Abram saw, and behold, the whole room was full of gods of wood and stone, 12 great images, and others less than they, without number. This is Jasher 11, 19, and 20. Absolutely love the book of Jasher because it does not refute Genesis in any way, but it does add a little bit more background that makes the stories incredibly interesting. Ancient church father Clement of Rome stated the religion of the fallen angels included magic and incantations, and this pre flood religion was the basis for the post flood Egyptian, Canaanite, Persian, and Babylonian magic system. This led to some diverse and erratic superstitions among the divisions of the post flood nations. My first really good Bible teacher started with this religion of the Egyptians, the Canaanites, the Persians, and the Babylonian magic system. Then he took me to the Old Testament, and as I read through and he taught me, I knew exactly what they were talking about. Fallen angels taught men the use of magical incantations that would force demons to obey them. Now, catch this, they're forcing other entities to obey them. That's not of God. We don't force people. So put that in your kingdom trait bucket as well. After the flood, Ham, the son of Noah, unhappily discovered this, and he taught it to his sons. This became ingrained into the Egyptians, Persians, and Babylonians. Nimrod was handed this knowledge and by it caused men to go away from the worship of God and go into diverse and erratic superstitions, and they began to be governed by the signs in the stars and the moons, the signs of the stars and the motions of the planets. This is in recognitions of Clement. Now, again, be careful what you teach your kids about. And anything that you do that causes other men to go away from the worship of God, you need to stop doing. It's getting get very serious. The 12 zodiac gods and their numerous other ancestor gods were worshipped in ancient Babylon. The Babylonian god Marduk was based on Nimrod's son Mardon, because remember, they're having some ancestor worship going on there. Here's some images of him. The Book of Jasher provides over 5 pages of detailed information about the social structure, form of government, and extreme fornication and homosexuality of Sodom. In addition to these descriptions, Jasher recorded their religious practices, so we know exactly what they were doing. Sodom was the first recorded city that observed the 4 pagan holidays we just learned about in the previous chapter. Cultic rituals were held at waterfalls, near forests, and they included sex, dances, and percussion instruments for a beat. Now, again, when the Bible talks about high places, a lot of times this is what it's talking about. And they had in their land a very extensive valley, about half a day's walk, and in it there were fountains of water and a great deal of herbage surrounding the water. And all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah went there 4 times a year with their wives and children and all belonging to them, and they rejoiced there with tambourines and dances. And let me tell you what they're actually doing while they were there. In the time of rejoicing, they would all rise and lay hold of their neighbors' wives, and some the virgin daughters of their neighbors, and they enjoyed them. And each man saw his wife and children, or wife and daughter, in the hand of his neighbor, and he didn't say a word. And they did so from morning to night, and afterward returned home, each man to his house, and they did this 4 times in a year. Jasher 18:12-15. Now, men, God put you here to protect your wives and kids, and not only were you standing there watching it, you were taking advantage of their wives and kids too. Now, I don't have to spell out what's going on here. Just fill in that information in your own brain and understand this is not of the God of the Bible. All right, next time we'll talk about the teraphim and how they were used in ancestor worship. I'll show you what they actually look like, how they made them, what they actually were, and you might be just a little bit surprised. Hit that like, share, and subscribe button, and don't forget to go to renalyn.com, check out my new book series, and while you're there, click onto the affiliates page and get yourself some clean food that's GMO free, non-metal. Look at the supplements on thebrighteonstore.com and drop me a little bit of donation. Being on the radio is just a little bit hefty on the finance department. Really appreciate it if you would do that. I'll see you next time for part 7. Bye.